Hello chess friends and welcome to your Out of Chess channel and welcome back to our 150 attack series. So in this series I'm going to show you a very nice and effective way how to beat the modern defense, how to beat the Pirc defense, and as promised we're starting also now our mini series in which I'll show you how to play against the King's Indian structure by using 150 attack methods, because your opponent can reach actually the same position by playing a little bit of a different move order. So when you're playing, of course, the move e4 as your first move, then your opponent cannot go knight to f6, because then he would play the Argentine defense and then you could play the move e5. But as we said, he's playing many times the move d6 or g6. The d6 would be the Pirc defense, the g6 move would be the modern defense, but with a huge difference for us now, because after move d4 and for instance knight to f6, we can still play knight to c3. We don't have to play the move knight to f3, and now after move g6, bishop to e3, bishop to g7, queen to d2. This would be now the position that we have played now many times and that we have explained so far in our series. But when you are playing the first move d4, and I wanted to show you this study because I'm a d4 player myself, and actually your opponent doesn't have to play anymore d6 or g6. He can still go knight to f6, and he would love to play maybe now the King's Indian by playing g6, bishop to g7. He's hoping that you're playing, of course, the move c4, then d6, knight to c3, g6, bishop to e4, bishop to g7. We would reach now the normal King's Indian structure. But how to apply 150 attack methods without getting this position? We want to play a different idea. So after move knight to f6, my recommendation is to play the move knight to f3, and this is now a little bit different because notice in the previous lines after move e4, knight to c3, bishop to e3, queen to d2, we didn't play the move knight to f3, which is a little bit different. So we're starting now, as I said, our mini series applying the 150 attack, but with this move knight to f3, which is, I think, also something worth to study, because if you're d4 player, then you want to, of course, have this kind of lines covered. So after move g6, knight to c3, bishop to g7. If you're bothered maybe by this line with the move d5, my recommendation is to go into the so-called berry attack with the move bishop to f4, e3, knight to e5, h4, h5. This line we have already explained in our London system series. Here's the link of our London system series. Please check it out, because in that videos we have explained some London ideas against King's Indian structures, and I've introduced you the berry attack, so you could reach maybe many of these positions, but just with a different move order. So if you are bothered by these lines, please check out the berry attacks berry attack studies. So but we're starting now this different ideas with knight to c3, bishop to g7, e4, d6. So we have reached now actually the classical system of the Pirc defense, but a King's Indian player will reach many times this position from black's perspective. And how to play against these types of structures? So we want to still apply our 150 attack idea with the move bishop to e3, queen to d2, and then we want to launch a flank attack, h4, h5, trade off the bishops here on g7, and deliver checkmate by creating a rook and queen battery. The plan didn't change, but it is, we have to say, it a little bit different, because in our previous analysis we didn't play the move knight to f3. So we can play now the move kingside castling here from black's perspective, and still we're going to play the move queen to d2. We will analyze also again this lines knight to g4, but today we're analyzing this line c6 b5 with this delayed bishop's move, because many times when we want to play h4 h5, our opponent will try to play bishop to g4, because with this move he could have a great control of the h5 square, because the pawn, the knight, and the bishop on g4 would cover the h5, and black is hoping for that you will never be able to push the pawn on h5 further in order to open the h5, because he's hoping that he could have a great control of that square. So in my opinion, we should simply stuck to our plan, play bishop to h6. Nothing changes, so we're still attacking here the castle king. So b5 you face many times. The idea is clear, to play b4, then also to deflect the knight from the defense of the e4 pawn, and then grab the pawn in the center of the board. Even if you prevent this, still black wants to create a flank attack, but because what black is hoping for is that you are castling queenside, and then he could have also great chances with this flank attack against your knight, and he will probably push the pawns further, and he's trying to open the position on the queen side if you castle queen side. But the cool part about the 150 attack is that you don't have to castle queen side. You can still stay with the king in the center, because we have to agree, I think, here that with these two dominant pawns in the center of the board, with these two dominant knights in the center of the board, you still have a great control of the center, and staying with the king in the center is only possible when you have a control of the center. So if you're not bothered if the files get open in front of your king. So as I said, in my opinion, you still have a great control. Now after move b5, now it's very important to play the next couple moves very, very correctly. So first of all, what you should do is to play the move bishop to d3. This move is a perfect move because it has a double function. First of all, after potential b4 move, you can still step back here to e2, so the knight will be maneuvered, but you have still the protection of the e4 square. And now also there is always the threat of the move e5, and I've explained many times in this structures that it's very important to cover your queen with the move bishop to d3, and then if something gets cleared, then if the d file, for instance, gets opened, then you are not bothered by potential trades of queens, because the queens cannot be traded off, and you don't want to trade off queens from the white's perspective, because you are on the attacking side and you don't want to simplify the game too much. So we have talked about these ideas already in our 150 attack series, so please check out our 150 attack studies from the beginning, because probably will not mention some of these ideas that are bothering, and maybe we have covered already your questions in our previous analysis. So after move bishop to d3, as we said, the bishop is covering the e4 pawn, and it's also covering here the queen, so no trades of queens on the d file are possible anymore. So here in the continuation we have b4 attacking the knight. That could be also a possibility, and I wanted to show you now a couple of my games. I think these games are really good because I played these games without inaccuracies, mistakes, or blunders, so you can apply this methods. I would not bother with some games that I played maybe in a bad way and my opponent played just huge blunders and I won the game. No, I wanted to show really some sharp attacking lines that you can play in your own games, apply them, and destroy your opponent in an early stage of the game. So b4, in my opinion, you'll see many times, but it's actually a huge mistake. It's a huge positional mistake that your opponent will play, because actually with this move b4 he's helping you out, because knight is maneuvering now to e2 and the knight will be maneuvered to g3, and when the knight comes on g3, notice that basically we have included a new attacker into the game. So now look at this, when the knight comes on g3, bishop is already attacking, this bishop is targeting the h7. Look at this, h4 h5 will happen. We are opening still the position, and basically every piece now of white, okay, maybe just the rook is not included into the, but every other piece is just included into the attack against black's king. And now after move knight to e2, notice also that the b4 pawn is hanging, so something went wrong here, I think, for black. Black is playing now many times the move a5, and as we said, still we can launch a flank attack with the move h4 immediately. And now comes the critical moment of this opening line that I wanted to show you. So this will be now our main idea of this video, the move bishop to g4. So this delayed knight move on b8, because if black plays in many occasions this move knight to d7, which would be perfectly fine, because many times black wants to have a control of the e5, because we have seen many times white's idea in our series so far. White's idea is to get this breakthrough with the move e5. Now with the move knight to d7, your opponent could have maybe a better control of the e5 square, but the downside, of course, of the move knight to d7 is that you're blocking your own bishop's activity. So many times black will play this idea, bishop to g4, and it seems so that black is defended finally this position, because he has triple protection of the h5 square. And guess what you do in the couple of more moves? First, I recommend you here to take bishop to g7, but now for king to g7, look at this, h5 is still possible. And that's the beauty about this sharp attack, about this 150 attack. Notice that our king is still in the center and we are playing really in a beautiful dynamic way. So after move h5, I've sorted out two games that I played. In one of my games, my opponent tried first to move knight to h5, which is maybe slightly more accurate but when it comes to computer evaluations, but still this is a much better position for white. White should destroy in these types of structures black immediately, because now we can play knight to g3, and this is now the beauty about this move, because we're opening finally. If knight to g3 happens to get this first, we're taking out here, we're taking the check. If the king moves, then we can also deliver checkmate on h7. So that's why many times you see this defensive idea. Rook to h8 will be probably many times the main defensive goal, especially because of the fact you see the queen cannot cover the 7th rank. Many times if the e pawn would be moved, then queen to d7, maybe with f6, black could have an opportunity somehow to cover the 7th rank. So that's why many times you see this idea in which black is trying at least to protect somehow the h7 square. But you should not be bothered about this move. Now we simply take the key defender, the knight, which is controlling the h5 square. And now a huge mistake would be the move on bishop to h5, because now with knight to h2 we can play g4 and even trap the bishop. If of course g5 happens now, in order to create some breathing spaces for the bishop, then we simply take out here the pawn and the bishop has to cover, then f4 f5, trying of course further progress against the bishop. So here in the game that I played, after moving knight to h5, my opponent tried g takes h5, but here after queen to g5, my opponent had to escape. Now I played e5, opening the center. Look at this, I am the one that I'm opening the center, although my king is still in the center of the board, which is really wild. That's also the importance about this move bishop to d3, because as we said, it covers our d file, and still we can castle queenside and include more attackers into the game. In the game that I played, my opponent tried bishop to f3, g takes f3, knight to d7. Here I just simply took out the pawn. I still have a protection of the e5. In the game, my opponent tried e6 because he wanted now to liberate this diagonal for the queen. He wanted to include his queen into the game, but I simply queenside castle, and of course d takes e5, d takes e5. It's not possible. You opening the d file, there are many dirty traps probably against the queen, so that's why my opponent tried queen to e7, getting out of the range, and I simply played f4. And I don't want to show you now the whole game. That's not the point about this video, because notice now we have now really beautiful pawn storm. We can include now more pawns in the attack. My opponent tried here this one, I played f5, and he simply stepped back, and as I said, I played f6, included now here more pieces into the game, and it was simply game over. So let's see now what happens after move h5. If your opponent plays bishop to h5, it's a little bit different. Now comes the important e5 pawn breakthrough. We have seen many times the e5 pawn breakthrough as a beautiful tactical motif of the 150 attack. Now d takes e5, that was also one of my games that I played. We have d takes e5, we have knight to d5, and now again knight to g3. As we said, with the move b4, actually our opponent helped us out here to get the knight on e2, then to get it on g3. So every piece is now maneuvered to the king side where we are attacking, of course. So here the continuation, my opponent again tried this defensive idea, rook to h8, knight to h5, rook to h5, queen to f6. Here I tried e6 to at least provoke some weaknesses. In the continuation, f takes e6, I simply took, and now after queen to d6, bishop to g6 is also winning, but also queen to c8 is winning the game for sure. So as I said, you see, this is a really beautiful idea. That you can actually play here the move h5 and open the position in front of your opponent's king immediately. So let's see now a different example. Again, my opponent in one of my games played the move bishop to g4. As we said, bishop to g7, king to g7, h5, bishop to h5, and now again e5. Here knight to d5, and now I played also again this same move order. It's really incredible how this position I've reached many times in my own games. Here my opponent tried the h6, and I simply took knight to h5, and actually in this position he even resigned, because after g takes h5, rook to h5, here rook to h8 could be maybe defensive idea, but now I could probably queenside castle, include this rook into the game, getting the rook on the h file, and even I think even knight to g5 is working here, including the queen into the attack. Then the rook will be trapped. So the pawn on e5 is really a dangerous piece. So it's, I think, a strategically lost game here for black. The evaluation is plus 8 almost for white. So let's see now a different idea that your opponent could play. So as we said, we have played knight to f3. We're still in our 150 attack idea, but with a huge difference that we have seen against the modern or Pirc defense. We have already played to move knight to f3. So I'll promise you I will cover also knight to g4 lines, even if you have played knight to f3, if you're getting kicked away with this knight. So as I said, we will cover now many lines for d4 players in the 150 attack. So after move knight to f3 and similar stuff, we're heading again into this line, bishop to h6. We have b5, bishop to d3, same order, b4, knight to e2, a5. We have now h4, and now your opponent could try this idea, and this is even much better than this move bishop to g4. So still we're delaying this move, knight to d7. So you see black didn't play so far with the bishop or with the knight. Notice that I think in the Pirc defense black has several development problems. Meanwhile, we are already on the attacking side here from white's perspective. After bishop to h6, black is hoping to defend himself with this idea, knight to g4. You have to step back with the queen here to d2, and now he's hoping to fix now finally the position with the move h5. So this is, in my opinion, a much better idea than to play bishop to g4 immediately, and it seems so that black could defend this position. But actually there is now again a huge positional problem about this position. Notice now, okay, maybe in these types of structures our attack on the king side is a little bit splashed. It's not so dangerous anymore to prepare some ideas. I don't know, knight to g1, maybe f3, g4 would be in my opinion simply too slow. But we can apply now a different idea. We can use now this file in order to attack. So because black has exposed himself a little bit too much here with his pawns, now we can play a3, and you see now the threat, a takes b4. Then we can also take out the rook, for instance, if a takes b4 happens. If bishop to b7, then still we can we take out first the rook and then the pawn on b4. So here after move a3, in one of my games my opponent tried c5. I tried this idea, a takes b4. Again, a takes b4 is not working. After c takes b4, I at least provoke some weaknesses. We have now the backward pawn as a huge strategical weakness. In the continuation of the game, I tried knight to g5. I want now to kick away the queen. f6 would be always very dangerous because bishop to c4 is going to happen, so my knight cannot be also kicked away from this very important square. In the continuation, my opponent tried e5, which is a good choice, I think, to lock now finally the center, because maybe in some occasions he will try now to get back with this knight, include maybe this another knight in the defense, but at least he's not vulnerable to this e5 pawn breakthroughs that we have seen many times was our main tactical goal in the continuation of the game. After move e5, I played c3, supporting now my centralized pawns. In the continuation, he tried queen to b6, attacking the pawn, and now I finally kicked away this knight. f3, we have knight to h6. The knight to f6 would be also possible, but probably he wanted to further maybe have a breakthrough with the move f5, and then maybe to retreat with the knight here on f6. So here in the continuation, I played simply g4, and again the 150 attack fun starts, because let's see now, my opponent tried b takes c3, b takes c3. He took now h takes g4, and notice now many times this breakthrough idea, we're sacrificing a pawn just in order to let this pawn rolling. Notice again that my king is still in the center. So here after move h4, we can play h takes g4, but we can play h5 immediately, and notice now the knight is a little bit dead here on h6. In the continuation of the game, my opponent tried f6, and I played simply h takes g6. My opponent took the knight, but also I took the knight here. Here d5 was played. Probably my opponent tried to include now more defenders into the game, but I simply took out this one. These ideas are not working to play g takes f3, because we can play rook to h8, king to h8. Now we can play queen to h6, and then we deliver checkmate. So it's simply too dangerous. So let's go back here after rook to h6, d5. I simply took the pawn here. Rook to a7 was the move by my opponent. He tried now to simplify the game by including more defenders into the game, but now after queen to h5, the game is over. My opponent resigned. So this is also a beautiful method. So let's go back. That's the beauty about the 150 attack, that you can maybe many times sacrifice some pawns. So this was now the critical moment. Let's go back. So g4, although look at this, this structure is 3 times covered, you can still break and enter here, and now push the pawn further. If your opponent doesn't react, then of course look at this, the g takes h5 is going to happen, rook to g1, the g file will be open, so it's a deadly position then for black. So notice that our king, although it's in the center, it's still not so endangered, I think, because your opponent didn't play with these 3 pieces. These pieces are too passive, so he didn't include more attackers into the game. So I wanted to show you now a different idea. So again, we have now the same position where we play bishop to h6, kingside castling, bishop to d3. It was now a game between Anish Giri against Shakri Mamedjadov with a little bit different move order, but we have reached now the same position. But we're analyzing now this ideas by black with the move bishop to g4 without playing the move b4, which is, in my opinion, a positional mistake. We have seen b4, knight to e2, knight to g3, we're maneuvering the knight, and then we will launch h4, h5. So black is basically lost, I think, after move b4. So that's why many times after move bishop to d3, your opponent will probably play bishop to g4, which is now more accurate to play, because now the knight is not included into the attack. We have seen that the knight is attacking many times the bishop on h5, is controlling the h5, so it's then a bad game for black. So now let's see how Anish Giri, it was a really beautiful game here by Anish Giri. He still played, of course, the move h4, and now the best move for black is the move bishop to f3. We will cover also the bishop to f3 line in the continuation of the video, but let's see now what happens if your opponent doesn't play the move bishop to f3. I think you have to play this move in order to stop, I think, a little bit white's progress in the continuation of the attack. So here Shakri Mamedjadov tried knight to d7. Anish Giri also played immediately h5. That's the beauty about the 150 attack, that you many times sacrifice the pawn. And here Shakri Mamedjadov played e5. We have bishop to g7, king to g7, we have h takes g6, we have f takes g6. Now after d takes e5, knight to e5. It seems so that Shakri Mamedjadov defended, but now a beautiful move by Anish Giri, queenside castling, and notice now he has now perfect attack against this h6 square. So we have now knight to f3, queen to h6, first this intermediate check. We have king to g8, and now g takes f3. We have bishop to f3, and look at this e5 move by Anish Giri. Beautiful tactical shot. Whatever you do, even if you try bishop to d1, then we take first this one, we're threatening checkmate, and then afterwards we will take out the bishop on d1. So here in the continuation, Shakri Mamedjadov tried this one, bishop takes h1, but now after bishop to g6, look at this, how Anish is attacking this position. Even if you try h takes g6, then we can play queen to g6, king to h8, and now with rook to h1, you're getting checkmated. So it was a very beautiful tactical shot. After bishop to g6, here Shakri Mamedjadov tried to escape, but now we have this one, again this idea, e takes f6, threatening checkmate. So here in the continuation, we have queen to c7 by Shakri Mamedjadov, but now a beautiful stunner, rook to g1, including now a new piece into the attack. We have king to h8, we have bishop to e4, still Anish is of course threatening some ideas of a rook to g7. We have bishop to e4, we have this beautiful stunner, queen to g7. Now in this position, Shakri Mamedjadov resigned, because if you try this one, then of course this one comes with check. You have to take, and now we can take out the bishop, then afterwards the pawn, and it's a completely winning endgame. So as I said, this was a slightly inaccurate maybe continuation by Shakri Mamedjadov. After move bishop to g4, in my opinion, you have to take the pawn on f3. But let's see now what happens if you take sorry about that. So after move h4, if your opponent takes now the knight on f3, it seems so that after g takes f3, your opponent could have good defensive chances, because now he got rid of this very annoying knight. The knight was controlling the e5. Many times we have seen e5 was now the huge positional threat. So now see, now black is trying to defend this position with the move e5, and it's not, I think, a huge problem if again you know what you're doing. Again, you should play here h5, h5, and in the previous analysis we've seen also g4, h5. You have to see these moves, because these are the only attacking moves that you probably have in your continuation. So now black has to make reactions. So after move knight to h5, you should simply queenside castling, and you may get bothered by this idea because it seems so. It would be strange to give up the pawn, but actually after e takes d4, and this is now must know theory, this position you reach many times. Please don't mess this up, because it's very important to know these lines. After move e takes d4, now we can play knight to e2, and notice now again with the move knight to g3 or knight to f4, we will get rid of the knight, and the knight is the key defender of all of the structure. So even if we've given up some pawns, it doesn't matter. We'll just include more pieces into the attack. Knight to g3, trade off the bishops, include the queen into the game. Even e5 maybe is possible, e6, liberating the long diagonal for the light square bishop. So as I said, in my opinion, this wouldn't be a good continuation here for black. So after queenside castling, your opponent could maybe try knight to f4, and now comes the stunning tactic that you have to know here in this types of position. And I see only one game in the database in this types of positions, and the white lost the game because he didn't play now the correct move. Now the best move is this one, bishop takes b5. Look at this, because whatever you do after c takes b5, we can play this one. Look at this, d takes e5, and the knight is hanging. You're also hanging here on the d file. So as I said many times in the 150 attack, the d file is a beautiful tactical possibility. So after move bishop to b5, what your opponent could do is first bishop to h6. After rook to h6, now he could try to take out your bishop, but now again d takes e5. If your opponent plays e takes d4 himself, then of course the knight is hanging. So here after d takes e5, your opponent could try this one, queen to g5, but now we're just including a new attacker into the game. And after queen to e5, we can play rook to h7. After something like knight to d7, if your opponent is desperately trying to include now more pieces into the game, then we can play knight to d5, and you see now everything is so messed up. If you play knight to d5, then e takes d5, and now I'm not seeing good ways anymore how to defend this position. Look at this, both of these rooks are coming into the game, the queen will be into the game, and black is again losing the game tactically here on the h file. So as I said, after move bishop to f3, g takes f3, black has to lock now the position with the move e5. If he doesn't do that, then you will be the one that is playing the move e5, h5 and similar stuff. So probably even if you play h5, you will sacrifice the rook, then you sneak in with the queen on g5 trying to deliver checkmate. So h5 is still a possibility, but again I think the e5 goal is our main attacking goal. So notice your opponent after move e5, okay, we're still playing h5. Now he has to make a reaction, knight to h5, but now queenside castling, knight to f4. That's the only way to keep the position locked somehow, because he's not allowing you to sneak in with the queen. But now bishop to b5 is simply must know opening theory. So I think these are really cool tactics. These are tactics that you have to know if you want to study this opening. Please check out also maybe this video once, twice more, just in order to get the grip. Please also check out the previous analysis. I know it's a long series. I know it's maybe bothering to watch all of these lines, possible lines, but if you want to have a good protection of any lines, if you want to have a good preparation of every lines, I think you have to study this openings like this, because you could get destroyed because you missed maybe tactic in an early stage of the game. But you can also, you see, destroy your opponent if he misses something. And I think the 150 attack is really beautiful, many times with beautiful attacking formations, with beautiful attacking ideas. So okay, I hope that you enjoyed this study. It was, I think, a very attractive study with great cool tactics. If you want to know more about the 150 attack, please check out our 150 attack series so far. Here's the link. And if you have trouble maybe while playing as black, check out also my Nimzo in the defense series and my hyper accelerated ranked Sicilian defense series as a good method against d4 and e4. And if you like this content, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. See you soon with some more videos, and what to say, chess is the best, of course.